All right, guys. So the other day on the body camera channel, I had a video, and on that video, I had an officer who confronted a man on the street for allowing a lot of drug activity to happen in his premises or his place of business. And there was an awful lot of comments on that video about people who say things to the effect of, you know what, that's messed up. The cops know this guy's doing drugs and yada, yada, yada out of his place. Why don't they shut that down? You know, the fact of the matter is it's not just that easy. You can't just know that something exists and then run in there and do something about it. But regardless of that, I want to explain the situation a little bit. But prior to that, I queued up this spot in the video. Let's watch that, and then we'll kind of talk about the things that you have to do as an officer in order to address that problem.
Calm down a whole lot since you've been out.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and get him down to the hospital.
Yep. Gonna get away from here.
Okay.
For some reason, this corner attracts a lot of drug addicts. I wonder why.
There's a lot of dope houses.
Yeah. A lot of it comes from that building right there. Alrighty, so what the officer was doing in this case was he's basically, I don't know, for lack of a better term, harassing this guy. He's saying, listen, we know that you're responsible for a fair amount of this activity. Stop acting normal and stop acting like you give a damn, because you stand by and you let this stuff happen. And that had a lot of people pissed off, because it's like, well, you know he's a bad guy. Why don't you just arrest him? Why don't you do something about it? You know, unfortunately, it's not that simple. And as a police officer, you have to deal with those kinds of frustrating situations actually quite often. One of the most tragic situations that I have to deal with almost daily, because I see this guy's name on the bulletin board, I see his face almost every single day. There's a guy that's walking around and on my beat who is a murderer. I was there the night that he killed somebody. The victim's son, who was 12 years old, sat in my car for 2 or 3 hours, I can't remember, while we processed the scene. I sat in the car and I talked to him about video games, and I put an audiobook of the Halo video game series up in the car so that this guy's kid had something to keep his mind off what was going on. We all know who did this crime. The homicide detectives know who did this crime. Everybody on the block knows who committed this murder. The problem is, with the amount of evidence that we have, the prosecutor's office does not agree with us that this is a case that we can take to trial. So this guy is out walking free until we get some kind of evidence that the prosecutor will accept. Now, take that for a moment and kind of relate it to these drug houses. I can know that a house is working and there might be a lot of prostitution and drug activity coming from that house, but in order to shut it down, what exactly do I need? I can't just take my observations that, well, you know, there's this this house right here on the corner, and there seems to be a lot of people who are addicted to drugs coming and going from that house. Is that enough evidence for me to kick in the door and catch them and charge them with doing something? That's not necessarily enough evidence. I mean, that's not really evidence at all. That's just an observation. That's what you take and you use that to kind of to find evidence. Well, then if I were to go along the street and I would, you know, start grabbing people, hey, where do you buy your drugs? Where do you buy your drugs? Where do you buy your drugs? And they all tell me, well, I buy all my drugs from this spot right here. That's the exact house. I go in, there's a, you know, there's a guy named Butch sitting on a chair. He's got an AK-47 in his lap, and he's the one that protects the door. Well, now you're getting somewhere, but still that doesn't prove that there might be drugs in there. At least in the county where I work, that's not enough for a judge to sign a search warrant. In order to get a judge to sign a search warrant in the county that I work, you need to get a buy out of that house. Now, people ask me, how does a cop buy drugs from a drug house? Like, how are you going to do that? Like, do you have to go deep undercover, and does it take months and months and months? It doesn't necessarily, but this is where we get into where people complain that we are criminalizing a lot of these drugs, a lot of the, like fentanyl, heroin, crack. These are all felony offenses. Why are they felony offenses? Well, if I'm driving along Main Street, let's say, and I see a woman who, I don't know, let's just say that I do a consensual encounter and I stop her and I say, "Hey, Jane, my name's Officer Ben. How you doing today?" I talk to her for a minute and I say, "Do you have any drugs on you?" And she says, "No." I said, "Oh, if you don't have any drugs on you, do you mind if I search your purse?" And she says, "I don't mind at all." I open up her purse and she forgot that she had a bunch of drugs in her purse. I place her under arrest and I charge her with possession of drugs. And then I ask her, where did she buy these drugs? And she tells me that she bought them at the corner of First Street and Main Street. And that, what did I say? There's a guy named Butch at the door, and he's the one that I buy my drugs from. I can put all that information in my report, and I can forward that to our narcotics detective. She will get arrested. She will go to jail. She will be contacted by a narcotics detective. The detective will say, "Look, you got this criminal charge. If you would like to work that out, we're trying to get into Butch's place. Would you be willing to do a buy for us?" So she will go with money that was given to her specifically. You know, there's a way this stuff happens. Buy drugs at this place, come back out, give the drugs to the officers. And if that happens, I don't know how many times, it's not super important for the point of this conversation, but that's how we get search warrants on places. Then they will go and they will boot the door in, and hopefully they find somebody with a large amount of drugs inside. Unfortunately, that's another complication about how these things operate, is that they don't bring a lot of product into these places at a time. It's not like you go in and they open this desk drawer and there's like 4 kilos of cocaine in there. They keep all of the drugs off site, and they will actually have people kind of come and go periodically throughout the day that will re-up this dope house. And when they do, they either have it in their pocket, or if it's a dude, they'll have it kind of tucked up underneath, in between the front and the back, or somebody might put it in their butt. Women have more places that they hide drugs. I took a woman to jail several years ago now, and this was one of those houses that we hit as a dope house. Pulled everybody out. This woman was charged with trafficking because they had probable cause to charge her with trafficking in narcotics. Take her down to the jail, and they put her in the body scanner, and they could see something inside of her cavity. Took her to the hospital. To make a long story short, they pulled a bag about this big. It was like a Ziploc bag with a bunch of, it had pills, it had heroin, it had fentanyl, it had crack, all in that bag, and she had stuck it up inside her so that we didn't find it. Unfortunately for her, we found it, and she was charged with it. But I don't know. There's a lot of things that go into getting a search warrant and actually shutting these properties down. It's not as easy as just knowing, hey, there's a bunch of drugs coming from that house. We're going to go ahead and, charge somebody. Sorry, my computer went wonky. But yeah, you have to be able to verify and quantify things in order to get a search warrant. And the way they bring drugs in and out of these houses, if I were just to kick in a door, for one, the Fourth Amendment would prevent me from doing that. But if I did, I just kicked in a door and I started grabbing people, I probably would not find drugs. I would have to search those people, and I would need a reason to search those people. And you also, when you're patting people down, there's things that you can't find without doing a search that you would need an even further warrant to do. Let's put it that way. And the best way to do that is have a charge, get somebody into jail. They're strip searched when they get to jail. And that way, if they're holding more stuff, that's how you find it. I don't know. It's just not as easy as knowing where the criminals are. You have to have something a little bit more concrete, more articulable than just a hunch. Because if there are also houses where, a lot of prostitutes and drug addicts are coming and going from. They're not necessarily drug houses. That's just a place where a lot of people like to flop. Now, there's usually somebody in there selling a little bit of dope, but I don't know. I don't want to overcomplicate the issue. I probably already did. I think I've rambled. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you guys later.